Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's episode is going to be a charging system test. Now, this Innocenti Mini has had issues in the past with the battery going flat, and I've done a bunch of wiring work to correct some of the issues in the harness. And one of the problems I had was the original regulator was still attached, and I think it was bleeding current through the system, but I need to double check whether or not this alternator is still functioning correctly because of the drain that was happening. It could be failed diode, so I want to check that. And there's a couple ways of doing this test. Now, the red light on the dash does turn off, so I know that some voltage is being produced. However, I want to find out how much and if it's sufficient to keep this battery topped up when driving. So there's a couple ways of doing that, one of which is using a standard multimeter. And what we'll do is we'll get the engine running, bring it up to say 2000 RPMs, and then I'll verify the voltage measured at the alternator, and I'll measure it at the battery as well, just to make sure that we are getting the correct voltage readings, and I'll talk about that in a minute when we get to it. However, I'm also going to use my carbon pile load tester now. This is a 500 amp carbon pile load tester. Not that we need to go that high, but basically it has a scale here for voltage, and we can apply a load to the battery, and we can see when the alternator can no longer handle the load. So we can basically figure out how much current the alternator is capable of producing at that given speed of the engine, and make sure that it is sufficient. So we'll get into this test later, but for now let's just start with the alternator test using the voltage multimeter here. And the first thing I need to do is actually just measure the battery voltage first, because that gives us a reference point to go from. So let's go to the boot and take a measurement. So here we are in the boot, and we can see that the battery voltage is 12.63, so it's a little low, but that is our reference voltage from this point forward. So when we use the multimeter to do the alternator test, if we see a voltage higher than this on the multimeter test and the carbon pile test, we'll know that the alternator is generating enough voltage to top up the battery, because this is currently what the battery is sitting at. So in case anyone's wondering, the current consumption with this car turned off is 0.02 amps, which is basically just the internal current flow of this battery. There's nothing on this car that's turned on, so this is just a negligible amount. In fact, this might even just be the error in the gauge itself, but basically it says that nothing is turned on this car right now. So I'm going to start this car, and the generator light should turn on when you turn the key on. So ignition on, red light comes on. Now this is saying that power is being consumed and not sent back to the battery. Since the car is not running, the alternator is not running, so therefore the light is on. When I start this, we should see the light turn off fairly quickly. And I don't know what RPM it's going to take, but once it's running, this light should go off. So let me start the car. And we did see the light turn off. So at least initially on this dash warning light, it says the charging system is working. So that's a good sign. So with the engine on fast idle, I'm going to go ahead and check the voltage of the alternator. Now, what I'm going to do is use the solenoid down here, which has the battery power post. So if I connect this down to the battery line here, and if I touch ground, 14.2. So that right there tells me that the alternator is putting out power above the threshold of the battery. So currently this multimeter says the alternator is working. Now let's go to the boot and do a load test. So before we do the load test, let's just double check our voltage back here. 14.36. So we're getting the same voltage reading back here as we are at the front of the car. So now let's do the load test. So with the load meter hooked up, it's showing also 14.5 volts on the panel gauge there. So I'm just going to apply a bit of a load until we see about 12.5 volts on the battery, which is what the battery condition was. Okay, you can hear the engine slowing down a bit. We've got about 50 amps or so. So I'd say this alternator is in good condition. So hopefully you guys found that useful. I like using this to be able to tell me the actual current output of the alternator when it's running. And this one gave, I don't know, 40 something amps or so when it was running. I don't go 100% off this gauge because I just don't trust anything. So if I wanted a more accurate measurement, I would take this off and get it tested professionally. But in the meantime, I know that it produces quite a bit of current under heavy load. So it is in fact working. Now, if all you have is this voltage meter, like I said before, as long as the alternator is putting out more volts than the battery has at a steady state, it is working. It's just you won't know what the actual current output is unless you have a gauge like this. So hopefully you guys appreciate that little charging system demo. And let me know in the comments below what you think. If you've got any other ways of using a multimeter to do a charging test, let me know, because I'm always looking for more ways of using just a simple piece of tech to do a charging system test or other electrical tests using just this. But anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys soon.